If it were in late evening, Lester would piss off the bridge. No one in the immediate area had the nerve to object. I once saw him piss in the back of the Baptist church at the bottom of the hill. Lester was a mean drunk. You know, one of those that like to pick on people, inflict pain. But he had better sense than picking a fight in pegs. She didn't allow that. He'd wait. Lester was an opportunist. Stanley Ray was a short, obnoxiously thin fellow who liked to talk. I guess this middle-aged fellow got on people's nerves sometimes. He had this penchant to get in your face and tell you something. He'd go on for quite a time bragging about how much money he used to have, just how strong he used to be, just how smart he was. People called him the man who used to be. "Shut up," Lester shouted at Stanley one night. Stanley went on like nothing happened. As Stanley rambled on, Lester in the booth seemed to twitch uncontrollably. The twitch was in his neck. He spasmodically jerked his head to the left about every 2 or 3 seconds. By the bar, the short drunk went on for about half an hour and left. His oratory for that night was long and obnoxious. Lester exited soon afterwards. Lester was 3 sheets to the wind. Anyway, they found Stanley about 2 miles down the river. He had a broken neck. His wallet was empty. The police ruled it suicide. The townfolk ruled it Lester. I was about 13 then. Regular work was not for Lester. Occasionally he'd do farm work. Sometimes there would be a missing chicken or two once in a while around the area. Copper wire would disappear from a construction site. Cars might be 2 tires shy and 10 gallons short. However, there was nothing that could be pinned on Lester. There were rumors around town that Lester picked the pockets of the feeble. Who knows? There were about a dozen single old miners living in shacks around the mountains. Once in a while you'd hear of one dying. And it was strange that few had any money on them at the time of death. Way, way up in those hills, things could go on, and no one would know. I guess about 1960 I noticed that his wife Clara appeared pregnant. I had my paper route, and now and then I'd see her outside the house. Her thin, hollow frame gave away her condition early in the gestation. One evening about 6 o'clock I heard Lester screaming at her. I heard him say, "It's going to be this way, woman. Don't say nothing more." I paused behind a tree. I heard a muffled scream from inside the house. About 15 minutes later, Lester came out of the shack with a burlap bag in his hand. The bag was dripping some kind of fluid. Saw him dig a hole in the backyard and with an old shovel nearby deposit the bag, contents and all, into a hole. He covered the hole with dirt and returned to the house. All the while inside the house were moans and weeping. After that I went home. As I passed their place the next week, I saw a thin Clara outside the front door of the shack. She looked extra tired, having dark circles under her eyes. She looked pitiful to me as I passed. Neither of us acknowledged the other. I guess that Lester didn't want a third child. But Lester got his due. In those days, many people often saw him retrieving junk from the forsaken places around town. I saw him at Lefty's junkyard selling scrap iron one time. He looked like he was in a hurry. The bottle was calling. It was said that he was scavenging for junk at an old abandoned coal mine. I believe he even took a flashlight and went in the opening. Maybe there was some copper wire, tools, or something else he could sell or use. Well, while he was in the mine, a wooden prop apparently collapsed and buried his legs under tons of rock. He was missing for about a month. A local search was conducted, but to no avail. 2 boys hunting in the fall noticed some small pieces of clothing near the open pit of the mine. The clothing appeared to have been chewed somewhat by an animal. They told their parents, and the local authorities brought in police to do some digging. Progress was slow. The diggers used crowbars and winches to remove some of the larger rock. The rest had to be slowly hauled out of the mine by wheelbarrows. It was quite an event for a small town. I went up with Dad, but we could see little since the police had the area blocked off. Even the news people got into the action. Several pictures appeared in the evening news. After about 2 days of digging, the searchers came upon an empty pint of Skinner Bay whiskey. Someone said, "It's Lester, all right." Shortly after that, the diggers came upon the foot bones of Lester. The digging continued. There were 3 more hours before they could get to the top of the body. And there, in the deep, dank mine, were the remains of Lester. There was little to be recovered of his former self. The rats had eaten just about all of his flesh and muscle down to the bone. Except for the skeleton, all that was left was a small portion of his rotting heart. CSAB Incorporated. It's a conspiracy, all right. Everybody that ever worked for them was too scared to tell. Now, I don't work for them, so I've got a little time on my hands to tell everybody the truth, I think. They might even get to me before the tale was told, but I'm going to do my best to tell the whole world the truth about CSAB. I want the world to know everything about those bastards. I know that they'll deny everything. That's why I've documented everything in Enclosure A of my story. They can't escape the wrath of the public once the truth is known. I was a SE, saboteur engineer. I'm not much of a writer, but I'll do my best to give you all the dirt. My name is Hal Scott. I worked for CSAB from 1988 to 2004. I was hired right after finishing high school in Chesterton. I started for them at 18. I didn't apply for work at CSAB. They chose me. I was surprised they picked up something besides flipping burgers locally so soon out of school. It seemed that CSAB had been keeping tabs on me from all my high school years. Hell, I was no saint in school. I'd been expelled 3 days in the 10th grade for modifying the school bell system. I've got to tell you, it was a breeze. I lost another week of education in the 11th grade when I ran a radio liquor ad through the store announcement system. I was just having fun. Anyway, back to CSAB and how I was hired. This plain-looking, dark-suited guy approached me several days after graduation as I was leaving the house for a job interview at a burger joint. He asked if I was Hal, and I said yes. He invited me for lunch at CSAB. Now, I had heard of CSAB. I thought they just hired those educated, brainy types. People said that they worked on research for other companies, improving items, creating new ones. That's just about all I knew about CSAB. This guy drove me in his new black BMW the 20 miles to the turnoff to CSAB. The company was about another 2 miles on a rather narrow road, which was surrounded by a big fence. The property for the drive was dense hardwood forest, seemingly making the operation opaque from the road. After driving down the road, we approached a gate, like they have on military bases. A uniformed guard checked the driver and me and motioned us on. Bill Lewis, that was his name. I remember he didn't talk much until we got inside the gate at CSAB. Then he seemed to open up. He seemed to know a lot about me. He knew how inquisitive I was, how I liked to mess things up just a wee bit so as to make life miserable for others, how I liked to pull one over on people, things like that. Right after he parked the car, we walked to the main door of a large 5-story brick building. The architecture of the building was monotonous brick shithouse design, so popular among corporations, functional with little personality. Another guard was there to meet us as we entered the building. We got the once-over and continued down a hallway to the cafeteria. The cafeteria's interior was exceedingly monotonous. It had pink and green walls. The ceiling was covered with that noisy, obnoxious fluorescent lighting so popular in American companies. I laughed to myself that I actually paid someone to come up with such a design. It was like stupidity paying ignorance for the ridiculous. After a brief walk through the food line with the selections on trade, we sat down at a table. Bill cut to the chase. How would you like a job at CSAB? I don't know. I thought this place was just for college types. I'm afraid I only have a high school education, as you know. Bill, that's exactly why we want you, said the recruiter without missing a beat. As you have probably noticed, college today is turning out functional idiots. Hell, most of them can't count past 10 without a calculator. Few can operate a toaster without a cheat sheet printed off of their computer. We need ignorant, intelligent people we can train for our work. We haven't had much success with college-educated. They seem to know it all and can't learn anything new. I was awestruck at this revelation. It was something that everybody knew but didn't talk about. I started to believe in America again. CSAB was actually offering me a job. How much do you pay? We'll start you out at $32,500. If you make satisfactory progress after 6 months probation period, we'll up it to $35,000.